So my topic for the annotated bibliography was leadership within my major, which is business administration. So that I will be focusing on leadership in business. My first citation is by Minks, Small, and Chatterjee, Leadership in Business Ethics. Does it matter? And Implications for Management from the Journal of Business Ethics. So the annotation, the source details the relation between corporate governance and organizational leadership in relation to issues pertaining to business ethics. So what this basically is focusing on is in terms of organizational structure within a business, from top level executives all the way down to the lowest level workers. Um, the same type of leadership strategy is employed and facilitated down that chain of command, um, kind of to create one consistent culture of leadership and ideology within the business. Um, the article focuses on kind of business ethics and what that means, noting that sometimes things that businesses can do may not be illegal, but unethical from a moral standard, and so making those choices to act ethically, um, you know, as an executive at the top of the organization, encourages those down the chain of command to act the same. And that's the idea of corporate governance, right? So as a corporation, then you're being governed and acting consistently throughout. So the connection to leadership. So the strong leadership decisions can have the lasting effect throughout a whole group or organization. Um, the consistency that's needed to employ corporate governance um, is really a culture in the workplace and in business here. However, that can be the same in any type of organization where there's a leadership structure, whether that be a nonprofit or even to a sports team, which I'll get into in my personal connection. Any time there's a group that is working together, this can be used, that being the idea of corporate governance, in order to progress as leaders throughout the organization, no matter how important or small one of the cogs in the organization may be. So personally, I'm a member of the Wartburg wrestling team here, and this is exactly kind of how we operate, led by our head coach, Eric Keller. Obviously, he would be acting as an executive in this case, in a business scenario, but he expects the same standard of excellence, as he calls it, from our assistants to our starters, to backups and freshmen that are just coming into the program, from the way that we carry ourselves to the way that we act and participate in class, to the way that we compete. He expects the same consistency and effort in all facets of our life, and we have come to kind of hold each other to that. If we see somebody kind of falling short, multiple people on the team will let that be known, and we all know that that is unacceptable, and that we're choosing to act as a result of this leadership in the same manner. So that's corporate governance from Coach Keller as applied to our wrestling team, but it's really the same as that structure in business and the leadership that comes with that. My discussion question for this source would be that what is one organization that you have been a part of or known to execute corporate governance, and what was the culture and attitude of the members within? So my challenge here is to find, or maybe you already have in mind, some group or business or somewhere where leadership is present that kind of uses this idea of corporate governance as outlined in the source. And then what was the resulting I guess, overall effectiveness in leadership of the organization. My assumption is that it would be positive, but I certainly would challenge that to be discussed. My second citation is by Cavico and Mujtaba, and it is Wells Fargo's fake account scandal and its legal and ethical implications for management, from the Quarterly Journal of Advanced Management. So the annotation, this source analyzes the effectiveness or the I guess, ineffectiveness of the performance measures that Wells Fargo used to assess their employees and lower level managers. So essentially, what was going on is that there were very strict and kind of actually unrealistic performance measures that were being used to evaluate how well employees were doing. And this, in many cases, was a determinant in if employees would get to keep their job. So it's a high stakes situation with a lot of stress and pressure. So what employees began to do here, that was ultimately facilitated by lower level managers, just because these expectations were so unrealistic, is they would open fraudulent accounts for existing employees for to meet quotas of accounts or cards or things of that nature within their business, in order to reach those expectations. Now, obviously, this is an executive decision that was kind of carried out and how they want to lead their business to develop, and then was facilitated throughout the business by lower level managers and employees, that this kind of became an accepted culture of how they were going to operate, and was really the opposite of how to lead, which is why I use this source, because it shows the result of ineffective leadership in a business and kind of what can be the result of that. Ever since, Wells Fargo has not really recovered, from a reputable standpoint, and have faced billions of dollars in fines and legal consequences that they are still enduring today. So the connection to leadership, this was, from the top down, a failure in how to lead, um, from a business standpoint. There was really no reasonable leadership strategy that they used to foster development within their employees and, in turn, their business. Good leaders would have collaborated with their coworkers to encourage them and progress, rather than teach and instruct them to conform to a culture of fraud within their business. One way that I think this could have been done differently, if they wanted to kind of put pressure on the employees to perform, which I'm not condoning, but it's certainly an option, is to turn up the heat, as we talked about in the book Leadership on the Line, by Heifetz and Linsky, to kind of communicate the importance of meeting business goals and being competitive in business, but doing so ethically and with development in mind. Ever since this scandal has come out, Wells Fargo has still been unable to find consistent leadership and executives to kind of turn this around and transform the leadership style within the organization. Personally, I interned at MedAlliance Group this past summer. It was a business administration internship, but one really cool thing that I got to be a part of was being around during quarterly evaluations. So the way that they assessed their goals was as a unit, as a team. They had company-wide goals, but also then within the different departments and even to the individual level, they had goals for those as well. So they assessed, obviously, the company-wide goals all together, kind of broke down how they got to that point and actually met all of their goals before reassessing what future goals would be based off of that, which leaves room to revisit or, come back to goals that they may not have met previously, which was not needed in this case. But then they also met individually with the departments and people that developed personal goals as well, which were also all met. So clearly this way of assessing performance was effective as they were, progressing, and also created an environment where everybody wanted to work together, but also progress within themselves to move throughout their career and do a better job personally as well. Obviously, this is much different than how Wells Fargo was doing things, and definitely an ethical way to assess goals. So my discussion question for the second source is, what is one leadership technique that you have seen used to work towards goals in the workplace, and how could this have been improved or done differently? Maybe you have had a bad experience or have seen a bad example of leadership techniques to work towards goals. Hopefully not as extreme as Wells Fargo. So how could that have been improved? But also, maybe something that was ethical but just not really, you know, a as good of a driver as it could have been to work towards goals. So how could that have been done differently?